Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Mike from Box and Jackalope, and welcome to another Kun-Lai Campfire. Last time we were joined by Skull Shorties, so because of that, we're joined by Skull Shorties again today. And we have a very exciting episode. Today we're going to talk about patch 8.3, which is on the horizon right after the holidays. We're basically going to kind of ramble a little bit on what we're excited for. Hint, hint, Panda Death Knights. We'll get to that. But there's a lot to talk about. Skull, thank you for joining.
I'm always here. I'm always dead.
Don't worry, me too.
No, 8.3 is, I've purposely been avoiding most of it. Not on like a point of like negativity, but like, every time like a new patch comes out, I typically try to avoid the gameplay stuff, and I try to keep myself updated on the lore stuff for my own videos, but I'm 8.3, I'm kept a little bit in the dark, but I do know the big points, the big chunky spoilers that are going to go down that are very promising indeed. I've talked about it on my channel a lot, and we can discuss a lot here about that.
For Skull, he actually does have a lot of really good 8.3 speculation videos. You should go check out if you're interested. I
wouldn't say a lot. Like 3, maybe 4. I think 3, but still.
They're pretty good watches though, nonetheless. But
oh yeah.
So the way I'd like to start this one off with, and I can actually take this if you want. I'd like to do like a little recap of what the general premise of 8.3 is. So for those of you who don't know, the next patch we're going into is patch 8.3 Visions of Enzoth, which takes place after the events of the Eternal Palace, where Enzoth is freed from his prison and takes Azshara prisoner. Basically what happens is Enzoth starts, if I'm correct about this, corrupting certain areas in Azeroth and giving people visions of what could happen if he basically continues to reign free. The two primary zones we're going to be questing in are the Vale of Eternal Blossoms and Uldum. The Vale of Eternal Blossoms is going to be restored to its former glory, which, if you're like me and you play the Pandaren, you should be very happy about that. I don't RP too much, but I have a number of friends that RP Pandaren that are very excited about having the Vale back. Unfortunately, when Enzoth is invading, it's kind of like very void themed and all corrupted again, but it's really cool. I haven't played the PTR, but visually it's interesting. I am not opposed to the Veil being used again for the storyline. I think it's absolutely awesome. And again, we've been basically questing in Mechagon and Nazjatar, and while these are old zones, it's nice to see them being recycled and basically used again. And I think they're fan favorites too. I think that's one of the reasons why we're going back there. A character that's going to be pivotal to the plotline of patch 8.3 is a fan favorite one, Rathian from Mists of Pandaria. We've had breadcrumbs of him coming back in 8.2.5, and it's been awesome. I mean, I'm excited about it. I know Skull's very excited about that. And yeah, we finally get to face off against Enzoth, and there's going to be a number of gameplay changes we could talk about. But that's basically the general overview of it. Skull, did I miss anything? I'd like to let you fill in the gaps.
I guess you missed some things that I'll point out now. That I pointed out like months ago. Like, it's crazy that like 8.3 has taken this long, but you know what? I think that 8.2 proved that Blizzard needs time to flesh out certain patches. With Legion, obviously they really didn't need to do that, which is weird and peculiar. I mean, certain patches in Legion were obviously amazing. 7.1, 7.0, I'd even argue 7.3 is really good, but we've talked about 7.2 being a trash bin before. But in regards to what you missed, that I kind of view as pretty crucial. So obviously 8.3 takes place after the events of 8.2.5 and those events, and Sarfang's actions still are rippling through both the Alliance and the Horde. Anduin is pushing this armistice. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've had a really big trouble pronouncing that in my video. Armistice, peace, you know? I'll just say peace. He was pushing for peace with the Horde, and one of the biggest things that the Horde is doing that kind of shows that the Horde is changing, that the Horde is becoming better, is they're no longer going to be led by a war chief. They're being led by a war council. And this is pushed even more with who now leads the Horde, with Gallywix being pushed away. He's out. Gazlo is now the leader of the goblins. Rokon, a Darkspear, is finally instated as the leader of the Darkspear tribe. Rokon is chieftain, and dear God, that was needed in Legion, for crying out loud. It should have been a heritage armor thing, but you know what? I'm fine with it being a stay a while and listen between Bane and Rokon, where Bane basically goes, you should be the leader of the Darkspear. And you know what? Rokon's like, you know what? I don't want to do it, but I don't think I'm worthy, but I'm going to do it. And a lot of people believe in Rokon as far as Bane phrases. You obviously got Thrall being back in the Horde after, you know, Sarfing really pushed that and lamented that whole thing of we don't get to hide. Thrall is not backing away from the Horde like he usually does. This time around he's sticking around like he said he would in 8.2.5. You know, you can talk to him basically after the Sarfing funeral, and Thrall will be helping and lead the Horde, helping in protecting it, and I hope that shows in not only 8.3, but also in Shadowlands, I hope. I really hope that we get to see more of him. And then, obviously, you got G-Firepaw and Asa both in the Vale, as you said. We're going back to the Vale. That's going to be very exciting for Pandaren. And, you know, they're actually having G and Asa do something, which that should tickle your fancy extremely. For me, I get to deal with killing Rexxar in the Visions scenarios, so, you know. And, not just Rexxar, but also Thrall. So
your worst, it's literally ends off as, like, going into your mind and giving you, like, your character's worst nightmare.
Seriously, like, Rathian points it out really well in the scenario once you defeat Rexxar. Rathian goes, like, this is such a abomination of a thing to twist Rexxar into doing this to his own animals, because apparently, like, Rexxar makes his animals into some void abominations, aberrations, you know? It's painful. Like, and speaking of Rathian, because you know I'm gonna go on a tangent with this, we talked about this months ago in a stream, in a podcast of Rathian returning and his glorious new model, but that was before we got his Drake model or his dragon model. People tell me apparently it's a young dragon form, not a Drake form. We were supposed to get Rathian as a Drake in Legion, but we never did. So this is Rathian as a young dragon, which Rathian is about 5 years old, so apparently whelps become dragons at the age of 5, or maybe that's just Rathian. I mean, I can kind of see it. We did have a blue whelp in Wards of Draenor from Classic, who became a fully grown blue dragon. So it's reasonable enough, I guess. Dragon Age is really weird. Dragon Age and WoW in general is weird, but Rathian being back and as a dragon and as a centerpiece of Battle for Azeroth is really great. We haven't had him in a speaking role. Now, he's had cameos, but we haven't had him in a speaking role since the end of Mista Pandaria. And that's terrible that they did that to him. He was such a big character at the end of Cataclysm, and then all the way through with Mists, and people were really excited to see where his character would go in Wards of Draenor. You know, Wards of Draenor is Rathian's fault entirely.
We only saw him as a whelp leaving Khadgar's tower in Warlords of Draenor, and the breadcrumbs from Admiral Taylor's garrison, which was really, really interesting.
Interesting, but a bit of a Kodo shit right there with Rathian's character. He was such a pivotal character. I mean, in 8.2.5, they literally have Rathian and Medivh sharing notes with what they've done, and I've made the big comparison in my video that Rathian and Anduin, not Rathian and Anduin, that's another topic. Rathian and Medivh are very similar in so many ways. They opened the Dark Portal, their own Dark Portals in their own little ways. Obviously Rathian did it through Kairos and Garrosh, but, you know, Rathian was kind of the one that, like, got everything together. He got everything into a nice little bundle. He wanted to protect Azeroth with the Iron Horde, and that went south. And it's kind of weird that it's that one saying in Kung Fu Panda, ironically enough, of Oogway saying that the one path of resistance or whatever, like, what Shifu was doing in the movie was basically, like, by making things more defended, it actually led to what he was trying to prevent. I forget the exact saying. Basically, Rathian had the Legion invasion happen sooner because of what he did with Gul'dan.
He caused it by accident, pretty much.
Yeah, he caused it by accident. I mean, so did Garrosh. Really, more of the fault is on Garrosh than Rathian, in my opinion.
But you especially
to Rathian, you can only imagine how it weighs on him, though, because I bet you in his mind, it all weighs on him, even if it particularly wasn't just his fault. You know what I mean?
And that's what I think is great about his character in 8.3. You know, like, basically we were dealing with the spoiled brat version of Rathian in Kata and Mist. He's only 2 years old. Obviously, he's going to be immature. Like, you know, he might have a beard, he might sound pretty old, you know, he's very mature for a 2-year-old, obviously, but, you know, he's a drake or a dragon or whatever, but, he was very brash in the way he did things. Instead of trying to find a cure for his dragonflight, he just wanted to wipe them clean, get rid of them, and he's very different now about that. Instead, he wanted to develop a cure. He realizes, I mean, it's a good thing that there's still some black dragons out there besides him, that, you know, Rathian was not flawless in his murder spree with the black dragon flight, but, you know, he's trying to make amends for the things he did. And one of the things I think is amazing in 8.3 is they focus on Rathian's take on Deathwing, his father, something that I thought was brutally underused in Cataclysm was the fall of Neltharion, the original name of Deathwing.
Absolutely.
Of this champion of the dragons. In Flying Buttress's videos, you get a really good take. I'm using Flying Buttress as an example, but in the one book, Dawn of the Aspects, where it speaks of the origins of the dragons, you really get a taste of how noble and honorful the Black Dragon, or Black Proto-Dragon at the time, Neltharion was. He was a great dude. The Old Gods roll around, or the Titans roll around in this case, both of them really fucked him up. Basically, Deathwing was a great person, a great dragon at one point, and the Old Gods ruined that. And Rathian, instead of focusing on what Deathwing once was, what he was when he was born, which is, you know, it makes sense. He finally gets time to reflect on what Deathwing used to be before he was born, before, honestly, like 10,000 years ago, you know? He focuses on that, and he focuses on the revenge onto N'Zoth for what he did to not only his dragonflight, but Deathwing, and I think that's brilliant. We really needed more characters feeling pity and sorrow for Deathwing, because I felt bad for Deathwing. If we get to, speaking of Shadowlands, I feel bad because we're talking about 8.3, but I would love it if we got to see the Dragon Afterlife, and we got to see Deathwing without the insanity. I do wonder if they're going to be like, no, Deathwing was a terrible person because of the Old Gods. We don't care that he was corrupted. He gets to go to the Maw. I hope they don't do that, but we don't know how the Arbiter operates.
Hey, maybe Revendreth or something. Who knows?
I mean, I think it would be cooler if there's an afterlife strictly for dragons.
That would be...
I think that'd be really cool, because...
Yeah, I agree, actually, thinking about it.
Dragons, or proto-dragons, actually came from the elemental plane, originally. So, and most elementals, they actually go back to the elemental plane when they die, and they can only be permanently killed in the elemental plane, like Ragnaros and Alakir. those guys are both permanently dead. Although there is stuff in 8.1 where there is a dark iron caster of some kind. I forget his name, but he tried resurrecting Ragnaros in this scenario. He failed, but that does mean that Ragnaros can come back maybe, and he's a fan favorite, and I will admit I like Ragnaros way more than Smolderon, but that's another topic altogether. I don't know why I'm talking about this. I'm rambling now, but
Return to the Firelands.
I prefer Ragnaros being a good guy, honestly. I think it would be really cool if the Hearthstone stuff of foreshadowing Ragnaros being lightbound somehow, being forced to work with us. I think that'd be really cool. I really like it when villains are, I like it when villains get redeemed, but I like it even more when villains' own punishment is them working with us. I really like that. But yeah, Rathian is like one of the centerpieces, the most excited thing I am for 8.3. Magni never really tickled my fancy.
No, nothing against Magni, but I always thought as a exposition character in BFA he was one of the weaker parts. Like I found Khadgar a much better character in that role in Legion and Warlords.
I'd say Khadgar was honestly better in WoD somehow. I mean, at some points in Legion, Khadgar was okay, but I get you.
One thing that's kind of poetic in a way about Rathian returning too, and if you think about it, in Pandaria he was like rooting for one side of the faction where he was kind of heavily involved, not controlling the faction, but he was involved in it, and now he joins us at the end of the current faction war, which is kind of interesting. Which is, I think, a really great way to close out the expansion, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know, well, we might as well talk about the spoilers. I've addressed it in my video on whether I think N'Zoth is going to die at the end of the raid. I do think, to some degree, he will be quote-unquote gone, but my own belief is that he will either be sealed away in Xal'atath, which is kind of alluded to in the raid, by Ajara giving the dagger to Rathian, or rather Rathian just takes it from Ajara. Ajara doesn't really care who took the dagger, but Rathian is the one who's given it, which is going to be interesting on how that's going to go.
Oh, because man.
There could be some trickery behind that. That could be either, Ajara puts in our heads or our minds that this dagger will kill N'Zoth, which I personally don't think so. I personally think the dagger's purpose is imprisoning old gods, not killing old gods. We've never seen it do that.
And even when an old god is killed, it doesn't necessarily perma-kill them. I mean, if you look at Pandaria with the Shah, how is N'Zoth's death going to affect the whole world if he does die? You know what I mean? Like, there's a number of, variables.
Yeah, I mean, N'Zoth could be like, you know what? Fuck you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and make my own Shah after he dies, Illyria even brings up the fact that when N'Zoth dies, or is gone, quote-unquote, more Whispers are showing up, which could either mean more old gods are going to come, the whole Shah thing, or N'Zoth just got more powerful by us killing him, the whole Gandalf situation or Obi-Wan situation of killing a character and they become more powerful than you could ever imagine sort of deal. But,
the thing that I'm really excited about, I mean, I think people really underestimate, too, how big of a deal fighting N'Zoth is. This is the guy that's been hyped up since Cataclysm. Every expansion I can think of since Kata has been speculated, even in Kata, people have just been speculating, when are we going to fight N'Zoth? When are we going to fight N'Zoth or N'Zoth? And now we're getting that chance. So that's, in my opinion, a really awesome way to close out Battle for Azeroth. Even if it was a bit predictable, it's just really, really awesome. I'm in the boat with you where for some reason, I don't see him being perma-killed. It just seems like a tough thing to do in a storyline like this, with how big of a character he is, with how sneaky he's been. I don't know. And we have Moxie in the podcast again. But I don't know. This is in terms of I agree, Moxie. In terms of storyline, to be honest, I'm hyped for Shadowlands, but I'm more hyped to see how they're going to conclude Battle for Azeroth, because Battle for Azeroth has been one hell of a ride in terms of its story. It's made people feel uncomfortable, it's made people cheer at those great moments, but man, can we imagine the sexy Terran Gregory cinematic with Rathian in it if there are going to be any next patch? That's going to be awesome.
And I got a Moxie in my lap, so that's always a treat, but yeah, I'm pretty excited to see how Battle for Azeroth will conclude. I mean, honestly, 8.2.5 is how I thought the expansion would just end. I thought,
yeah, right.
It honestly, I feel like they could have made N'Zoth his own expansion, and Moxie has left. Moxie has opened up my door and has left. He's sick of our podcast already, like most of our audience. But it's gonna be really interesting to see how this whole expansion will conclude. I mean, a part of me really wants just. I don't know what I want as the ending. I mean, personally, I would love it just, N'Zoth being sealed away in Zaltath and them doing another Aftermath cinematics. I love those at the end of BFA.
I think we'll get those again in BFA. I think it'd be definitely a good time to see characters reflect on the faction war, reflect on the old gods, and basically the current state of affairs and their factions. I mean, hell, little breadcrumbs go a long way, even for someone like me, right? G Firepaw as an ambassador is like huge for someone like me, even though it's a little tiny detail. At least I can be like, yeah, my leader's doing something. You know what I mean?
It's definitely something. I mean, I would love it if we just got. One of my favorite cinematics in Legion is the epilogue one, because it showed off all the current leaders of the Horde, and it was so weird to me seeing how
feels bad, man. All current leaders. No, just kidding.
I don't know about feels bad, man. About that.
The G Firepaw is joking.
Oh. I forgot about that. It's weird because that's how we became friends.
That is how we became friends. For those of you who don't know, was G Firepaw being left out of the feast.
No, it wasn't the feast.
Oh, it was the 8.1.5 cinematic of the PTR. He was just absent.
Yeah.
And then we just talked about it, and I shared it to him when they added him. So, I mean, I'm guessing there was an outcry, obviously. But, anyways, one of my favorite cinematics was the feast. The Horde leaders all gathering up. You got to see all of them in their new HD models. Saurfang for the first time, which is weird because he has only one shoulder and he's wearing the war paint. But what can you do? I don't know what they were thinking with that. They could have easily not include that, but what do I know? I'm not an editor for the cinematic team, but Terran Gregory, just letting you know, maybe, don't do that. Don't do that with a character before they they change up their look like that before the battle even happens a year from now. But you had Bane's new model for the first time show up, Nathanos, Gallywix for the first time ever appearing in a cinematic. Well, he appeared in the Vol'jin funeral cinematic, but he was his skinny red self, which we all are like, no, that's not our Gallywix.
Gallywix, oh god.
That is the wrong Gallywix. That is a young, youthful-looking Gallywix that he clearly uses as a poser to get, a decoy. There we go. I got the word for it. But I love that cinematic of just the leaders just chilling out, interacting, eating together. I would love that because, now there's even more of a reason for them all to be gathered in gathered. Why am I saying gathered? Gathered in Orgrimmar, because they're a war council now.
Well, I was gonna say, wouldn't that be such a poetic ending if they had another feast at the end, with all the leaders?
That kind of sucks though. The Forsaken don't have a leader now though, so
I guess they could include Lillian Voss at that table. I feel like she's the only one that would work. Really, she's the one that's kind of like, in 8.3, she's the one that kind of gets the Kalia and the Dark Rangers together, but Kalia is not the leader of the Forsaken, and from a Chinese interview for Shadowlands, it sounds like that won't be a thing for a while, which is kind of upsetting. I mean, maybe she'll be a thing in Shadowlands, and it just hasn't happened yet, but...
Just picture they do another Feast cinematic, and G-Firepaw's just, like, not there again.
Oh, that would be...
Hey guys, I got the invitation. He shows up at the end. Oh, man.
I feel like Sylvanas didn't invite him on purpose. I mean, in the book he's there, but at least I think he is.
I think he is in the book, actually, and then there's some Pandaren, like, ribbon dancers or something.
Yeah, they're ribbon dancing, and Sylvanas is just disgusted.
The Pandaren are like the exact opposite of the Forsaken. They're like, we enjoy life, live life to the fullest, eat, enjoy yourself, be kind to others. Forsaken are like the exact opposite of that. And what's interesting is they're going to be, with Sylvanas gone, the Forsaken can be less toxic.
Yeah,
And,
oh, absolutely.
It's one of the things that our good buddy Necroxus talks about, of how the Forsaken are interesting and great, but they're interesting and great when Sylvanas isn't there. I mean, I liked Sylvanas until recently, obviously, but if I was to go and say when she kind of fell out of favor in the, you know, in my own personal belief, I'd say around the time of Wrath / Cataclysm, where she came back.
One of the best Forsaken characters of recent that I can think of for me was Thomas Zelling. I really liked him. He was a good character.
Thomas Zelling was great, not only because he was best buddies with Rexar and Misha, but he was just a great character. He cared about his family. He just wanted to. His whole thing was about family, and that's very in favor of the Horde. That's very in line with what the Horde's belief is. It's all about family. I mean, a lot of people argue, oh, that wasn't a thing till Vol'jin, but I mean, I'd argue that Thrall really pushed that message. He didn't push it too hard like Vol'jin did, but the Horde is a family. It's a band of misfits, people who don't get along. You know, they're like siblings. You know, you don't always love your sibling, but you know, you'll still help them out when they're in a bind. They're very different from you sometimes too, but that's just what the Horde has always been. And Zelling fit really well in that, and he helped out Bane with freeing Derek, and he suffered for it. And you know, we could have gotten Forsaken Shamans with him. We could have gotten you know, a potentially new Forsaken character taking some huge leaps with the other characters. Again, he got along well with Lillian Voss and Rexar.
I don't think he was hated by players either. I think a lot of people liked him.
I mean, obviously the people who disliked him were the Sylvanas loyalists, but you know, they hate anything that goes against their queen, so sorry Sylvanas loyalist if you're listening. I know you hate my guts, but...
Skull, and I don't want to cut us off on this topic, but I think we should get back on 8.3 a little bit more.
No, you're right. I'm rambling like I always do.
I ramble all the time, too, about this, because my mind goes... Okay, this is what we mean, though, guys, and I don't want to get off topic again with this, but, like, Battle for Azeroth has a crap load of really interesting storyline that caused a lot of discussion, and it's one of the reasons I love it.
Yep.
So 8.3, we covered Rathian, we covered Enzoth a little bit. There's a lot of characters we could go into individually. I will say one storyline that I'm excited for that is going to bridge us into Shadowlands. I know I mentioned this to you a lot. After playing through the Alliance stuff recently, I have a newfound appreciation for Talia Fordragon. Probably in my top 5 BFA characters, but she basically tries to go... She writes a letter to Anduin being like, you know, I'd love to take you up on that offer and visit Stormwind to learn more about my father. Anduin says now is not the time, even though Jaina kind of thinks that he should, because she does need to find out the truth eventually. But that's an interaction I'm really, really excited to see. I'm one of those shippers that I like Anduin and Talia. I hope they become a thing. We'll have to wait and...
I'm about to ruin this whole man's career. You know, I brought it up earlier, but you know, I wasn't really for this at the start, and it's not for the reasons you think. This might be a little. I wouldn't say it's controversial. I mean, it's the internet. Everything's controversial, really. But I wouldn't mind some Rathian Anduin. Saying that, I'll be blunt. I think it's not a bad relationship if they focus on it. I think it'd be great if they do something with it. Make some people happy.
They could even do a love triangle.
They could do a love triangle. Personally, I've always been more of the Anduin and Tess group. We're a very small group, and we're definitely a sinking ship at this point with Talia being introduced. But Rathian shows some interest in Anduin, and that's not just me saying it for the sake of, shipping wars, but there's going to be a cinematic apparently with Rathian coming back and Anduin freaking out because N'Zoth is messing with everybody's heads, including Anduin's, which is horrifying. Our peaceful boy Anduin, he's being triggered by N'Zoth's whispers, which you can only imagine what that could do to Thrall, Bane, etc. Also Bane's apparently present. Bane is very active in 8.3, and a lot of people actually believed that this was because Blizzard scrapped the War Chief. They were originally going to have Bane as War Chief. I don't agree with that. I don't really think that they were going to make Bane War Chief. I mean, I'm sure that was something that they might have thought about doing when they were writing this whole thing up, but I do think that Sarfang really alluded to the fact that the War Chief needed to go. And those cinematics take a long time to make, both in voice acting and modeling, and I mean, I do machinima with WoW Model Viewer, and that takes me weeks to do.
Especially right now.
Can you imagine the work that goes into those cinematics?
They do custom animations.
I've seen them add, really unique poses and gestures. They do a lot of 3D spins, turns and whatever. Dear God, Taron Gregory Taron Gregory and his team are gems. They are astounding. I will be a shill for them. I don't give a F about what people think about shills in Warcraft. You know what? The cinematic team is always on point.
Dude, they are always on point. The work, I love the little details they put into the cinematics too, with facial expressions and some things that might be going on in the background that you can speculate on.
But going back, we should probably go back on point with the whole Bolvar and Talia thing. I'm sorry I disrupted it with my rambling some more, but
it's absolutely going to be one of the best parts of hopefully this patch and then the next storyline. I like how it bridges us into Shadowlands.
This is my own take of what's going to happen. So I think that Anduin is not going to tell her, because Anduin is really bad at, telling people, and I'm honestly surprised they told him, of all things. I was really surprised that was done off screen. I figured that was actually going to be a plot point they would address in Shadowlands or in the pre-patch, but no, he knows. Tyrion told him at some point, apparently, probably around the time that he was. I don't know when they could have.
I think. Do you think Varian? Or Varian knew, right?
They make it sound like Tyrion told Anduin at some point, so it must have been around the time of Cataclysm?
Or Warlords. Cataclysm or Warlords, I don't know. It had to have been before Tyrion's death, so that's the start of Legion. And probably way after Anduin turned 13. Because when he was 12 and he was mourning the loss of Bolvar, they made it sound like they weren't going to tell him. So, I don't know what's the deal with that, but Bolvar is going to be such a center point character in Shadowlands, in the pre-patch, and even in
Visions of N'Zoth, because, you have the whole Death Knight recruitment thing.
Pandaren Death Knights!
I'm only...
I'll never understand that, but... I mean, I kind of get it, but not really, but I just want to see if there's, unique stuff, a quest line. I mean, some people have doubts about that. I mean, I think that there's going to be a quest line because I want it to happen, but if they don't do it, I completely understand why they didn't.
I get the feeling it's going to be like the Allied race thing with the way the dialogue is right now.
I hope not.
I think you might have to do a little quest on, a current character where, I don't know, but I hope we do get a little storyline related, because it would be pretty awesome with them sensing some sort of disturbance in the plane of death or something, like described in the
Yeah.
dialogue.
Some Shadowlands hints and foreshadowings and whatnot. I mean, we know it's happening now because
Mhm.
8.3 and we got Shadowlands announced before 8.3 came out, so we know what's coming as as us as the players. But obviously the in-game NPCs and the people know nothing about Sylvanas' shenanigans. Otherwise, we would have bolstered Icecrown Citadel. We would have wrecked Sylvanas before she would get there. I mean, I think we would if we were united. I mean, the Alliance and Horde plus Bolvar would, I think, kick Sylvanas' butt together.
It would have been like that
Obviously-
artwork that fan made of Bolvar
Pretty
holding
much.
Sylvanas.
I love that artwork, man.
So
I know it's
so back to more of the Enzoth stuff, because I could do a whole episode on Bolvar.
we could, yeah. We probably should.
I second that, actually. Maybe next week.
Next week, maybe. Yeah. Let's
Um,
talk about there.
I'd like to talk about some of the gameplay additions, allied races. I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but I don't want to get too much into the lore of it. But next patch,
Yeah.
for those of you that are interested, we're getting 2 new allied races, the Mechanomes and the Volpera. 2 pretty obvious ones. Popularity-wise, I don't know how popular they're going to be among fans. I've seen some backlash for the 2 of them where people are kind of like, eh. That's what I've kind of seen for most people. I mean, I'm always happy with new races to play. I actually, like, because I just played a lot of the Alliance stuff now, I just got Kultirans, and even with them I had a pretty fun time just re-leveling one as a druid, so having a new model to play around with is good. I do have 2 friends that are going to be race changing to Mechanomes and Volpera, so there's definitely people that are excited for them. I'll probably roll an alt of each of them, but the thing I like, again, is this is probably going to be a long patch before Shadowlands, and gameplay-wise, this adds a lot of replayability for people that are bored and want to roll an alt. So
I'd say out of the 2 I'm most excited for, it's one of those races where it's like, I knew they were going to do it at some point. So it's not like, oh my god, they actually did it. No, it's more like, oh, they did it finally.
that was even how
wasn't a
Ian
matter-
announced the Volpera. He's like, you guys knew this was coming, Volpera. Here you go.
It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. That's the thing with the Volpera and the Mechanomes. Personally, I'm not like, oh my god, these are the greatest things ever. Like, it's obviously,
People know what I want. I'm not even gonna say it.
Broken
They know what I
Draenei,
want.
right?
Yes, Broken Draenei, but the other one. The other big guy, the Magnathals. I said it, fine, whatever. But those are the ones I'm like, oh my god, they actually did them. Like, I'm not expecting them to ever happen.
That would be
personally.
that would be like one of those yes! Oh my god! I would do the same thing too, actually. I'd be happy. I'd be happy as fuck if Magnathal were playable.
The Volpera have some really cool things, like they have their own little campsite, they have extra bag slots, I forget the other racial abilities, but that's just to name a few. I'd say, I'm always burning Horde, so burning blood for the Horde, so Volpera are obviously a little bit up there for me. The Mechanomes were expected because they had unique dance animations. Honestly, a lot of the lore with not the Volpera. The Volpera actually, I'd say, have a little bit of an lore to them. Like, it's interesting to see the aftermath of Sylvanas getting booted. I like that. I really like seeing
How the Horde is doing.
I like
after-
seeing the Zandalari complaining to Bane in the war room.
I haven't seen anything yet of it.
Oh,
I've
I should
avoided it.
stop talking.
No, you're fine. This is a spoiler place. I'm gonna get spoiled. It's my bad. I haven't watched it yet. I was going to months ago. I did, well, a month ago probably. But honestly, the more juicy lore bits are from the Mechanomes, because you have the little gnome himself who deserves way more praise. And as someone who is a avid person for the Horde, I will say gnomes are awesome because I can and I will. and Mekatork is coming back, and he will be king of all gnomes, not just his gnomes, but the mecha gnomes too. Ezra will remain prince, I believe. He'll still remain a leader for his people, but Mekatork gets his own little Iron Man chest, little thing, a little triangle on his chest to keep him alive and keep him pumping. But he's the king of all gnomes now, and I think that's really cool. I mean, Horde gets Gazlowe. That's something that we've always wanted for the goblins. I've talked about it a little bit, but Gazlowe is, like, beautiful. Love him for being the leader of the goblins. That's, like, the best choice. That's, like, the Horde is looking so good. But, Mekatork being alive again, or rather, confirmed alive, I think we all kind of knew he wasn't gonna die. At least I didn't think he was going to die. I think it would be stupid to kill him off, because there's no one to replace him, really. And they just started doing stuff with him in 8.1. I thought that was great with what they did with him in 8.1 anyways. But, I really like the juicy lore bits that the Mechanomes get of essentially reviving Mekatork. I didn't see all the lore bits about that. I just know that he's coming back and he's the king of all gnomes, and I think that's great. I don't know what stuff happens with the Volpira. I just know that they help out with the Horde, and Bane, originally tells them no, and then tells them yes.
I like how they have to, like, prove themselves to the Horde. I thought that was really cool.
I know some people say it's out of character of Bane to say that, but...
It is and it isn't. I can only understand the stress he's kind of going through right now, too, with everything.
I mean, you got N'Zoth, an old god, unleashed at full power. You got Sylvanas out there somewhere. You've got the Horde in shambles. You got loyalists and unloyalists at each other's heads. There's no longer a war chief, and that's obviously going to turn many people's heads like, what? We don't have a war chief? Oh, I can do whatever I want then.
No.
This patch is way too huge.
There's gonna be an adjustment period, and yes, this patch is ginormous. It's big. It's a big boy. It's a big patch.
Like, we have about 10 minutes left of the podcast, and there's so much I want to get into still.
There's so much to talk about.
I'd like to talk about some of the gameplay, if you don't mind, real quick, because I know there's stuff I'm, like, thinking of that we mentioned on our first video with Goliath. I think it was Goliath or Kai. But, the invasions and the visions that they're going to be adding, which is... honest to God, I know we've been plugging a lot of people this week, but Taliesin and Evitel made a great video explaining the gameplay of 8.3. Essentially, there's these little things, I don't know what they're called, but they're these little visions in Orgrimmar and Stormwind, and you can either play through them solo or play through them as a group. You can do them, I think, twice a week, and they cost like 1,000, I forget what they're called, but there's like items you get from the invasions in Uldum and Pandaria. In order to do that, you need to do the visions in order to upgrade your cloak, because you get a legendary cloak from Rathian this patch, by the way, which is pretty awesome. I'm excited about that. But in order to upgrade it, you have to do these visions and defeat the boss in these visions. So basically like a little bit of a grind, but it doesn't seem bad from the way they described it. It seems fun. And I think having that cloak as a reward sounds kind of interesting. I'm curious to see how it's going to play out, and if it's going to be in attunement for the actual Nyalotha raid. That's something I'm very curious about, how it's going to affect gearing alts, if it's going to be a pain in the ass, because the way he described it in his video, if you miss 1 week, you might fall behind, which is kind of a pain for those who don't get to play too often. But at the same time, I think overall, something like that where there's like difficult solo content or like small group content, I think players really like that. And that's, if you go back to Legion, the Mage Tower was widely, overwhelmingly received, where you get a really cool weapon skin that gets taken out of the game if you do it. I think people really like stuff like that, so I hope Blizzard continues doing more stuff like that. Like, a good example for me, I think a good reward for that would be, like, you get the base cloak from Rathian. If you upgrade it to a certain level, you get a really badass appearance that wouldn't go away after BFA, but it could be something that you said you earned. Or you could get a special title if you did it during patch 8.3, something like that. I think are really good rewards for players to get motivated to do stuff. I don't want to get into the allied race thing, but I think there's a lot of cosmetic rewards that people really cling to. As far as I know, I don't know for sure, but yeah. Overall gameplay wise, I guess what I'm trying to say is it seems like a nice change of pace from 8.2's gameplay, so I'm excited for it.
People are pretty pumped about the backpack you can get from doing all this content, although a lot of people are also upset that it's so tiny, but I don't think it's gonna look that tiny at the end of the game. If it is that tiny, I mean, that's probably because Blizzard's like, you need to do the Recruit a Friend one if you want the big backpack, which is kind of scummy, but, I mean, hopefully they're like, no, we're gonna make it big. They're probably like listening to the feedback of, no, you need to make this a big backpack, and they'll be like, okay, we can scale that up for you.
Hopefully they give like a quiver transmog to hunters. I think that would be really nice.
I think that'll be something for the Covenant in Shadowlands. I could see them doing that, maybe. I think that'd be great. I mean, one thing that I'm kind of hoping for is the Covenants aren't just armor specific, but class specific too. At least while we level. I think that'd be really cool, because give people like a little taste of what you can get if you choose this Covenant by, giving this leveling armor. I think it'd be really great. But that's Shadowlands stuff. I don't want to. I feel so bad because this is an 8.3 video, but it keeps going back to Shadowlands.
I think that's partially because of how connected they are. So it's hard not to.
I mean, it's hard to, if I was doing podcasts back in the day, I'm sure that if I talked about Legion while it was 6.2, no one would bat an eye, because it's Warlords of Draenor. I mean, I don't want to say BFA is Warlords of Draenor, because it's not. It's nowhere close to how bad that
whole thing was.
BFA has been a very solid expansion. I'll outright say it on this.
Mm-hmm.
I think, personally, and I have no problem saying this to anyone, I think it gets a lot of undeserved hate. At the launch, I can understand how some people were upset, but ever since 8.1, BFA has turned out to be a very fun expansion, in my opinion.
I would agree.
So, anyway, guys, couple more things, and then we are basically winding down in a few minutes. But me and Skull have done a few videos on 8.3. I did one where I was like, I really like the Pandaren, because I'm really excited about the Pandaren appearing in the Veil. I could go on and on about it, but a TLDR is, fuck yeah, G-Firepaw, we got Terran Zoo, Asa Cloud Singer, we got Chen Storm Stout, Li, we have Taoshi, I forgot to say her name, from the Shadow Pan. Awesome, Lore Walker Cho, you can't go wrong with that. But yeah, we've covered 8.3 a good bit on our channel. I think the TLDR, we wanted to make this podcast as an appreciation for the patch, because a lot of people have been covering it, but they've been covering Shadowlands more, and we felt that this was very appropriate right now, just to send some love to Blizzard for what looks to be an awesome patch and a great wind down for Battle for Azeroth. Skull, do you want to send any love towards BFA?
I send all my love to BFA. It had its problems, obviously. Every expansion has its problems. Nothing's totally perfect like Mr. Pandaria was. But I enjoyed myself quite a bit in BFA, and honestly I'm glad that, I remember back when 8.2.5 came out and concluded, people are like, they're going, is this it? Is BFA over? Are we done? Are we not getting an end raid? Which I think that was a little bit ridiculous that people actually thought that.
Mm-hmm.
But, some people thought that the Eternal Palace was going to be the final raid. And, I can kind of see it maybe, but no. That's not typically how they do stuff. God, could you imagine Eternal Palace?
That would have made BFA wind up with a really bad rap like Mod, which would have been awful.
Shadowlands, you do have to wait, like... That would be the Siege of Orgrimmar and Hellfire Citadel memes all over again of Happy Birthday.
I don't think we're gonna get Shadowlands until probably the fall, like next fall.
I'd say late summer. That's my take. I think that we might get it late summer. We'll see. But I'm pretty pretty pumped for the next patch. It's good to see how BFA will end. I'm really curious to see the cinematics, how the story will conclude, see Rathian again, shed some tears over fighting Rexar and Thrall, my boys, being killed at my hand, and seeing them getting tortured by N'Zoth. Yeah, that's always fun, Blizzard. Thanks for that. But and you got some really cool stuff like the Mogu being good guys. That's something I never thought they would do. Seriously, that's such a surprise, enough to make Lord Arcacho go, oh, that's happening. Like that's happening before the Sarok. That's kind of weird, but I'm pretty pumped for this patch. I don't know too much about it after everything I just said. I only know some lore nuggets, but I'm pretty pumped.
Well, guys, I think that's going to wrap this one down. This has been recorded around Christmas time, so we want to wish you guys a happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and any holiday that you might be celebrating. I think 2019 has been a very fun year. It's been about a year of us doing the podcast now, almost, too, so that's been crazy. I mean, I can't thank you guys enough for all the support on both of our channels, our podcasts, anything, It really means the world to us, so, yeah. Anyway, guys, we'll see you in the new year. Probably, or maybe before that.
Bye.